So this morning, I invite everyone to consider, for the last couple of weeks, I've been talking about the significance of the phraseology in the New Testament when Jesus said to the people who were listening to him, he said, let those who have ears hear. Let those who have eyes see. Now, for us here in this time, in this place, in this culture, kind of missed against. The thing that's interesting, if you try to study from culture to culture, is one of the hardest things to grasp is the idioms. So, of course, an idiom, or it might be a couple words that go together, but have a meaning totally different than what you would expect. And without understanding the idioms of the language, we sometimes misinterpret things. We take things the wrong way. There was a comedian who had a very, very short show on TV here. He was from Japan. And his comedy was all based on the fact that English as taught in the schools in Japan was not English as practiced or understood in the United States. And he would go around and he would ask people for something using an idiom, what they would come up. So for example, he went into a store and he said he wanted adult trainers, and nobody could figure out what they wanted. Finally, they brought him a package of Depends, and he said, no, an adult trainer. This was sweatshirt, a sweatshirt. He wanted a stadium jumper, and nobody knew what a stadium jumper was. And it's the baseball jacket. It's the fan that a baseball jacket wears with the name of their team on the back, or a football team on the back of the back. So the idioms of one language, when they get translated into another, we kind of lose that. And for those who are interested, George Lamsa, Lamsa, came from the area of the Middle East, what we would call Kurdistan today, I guess, northern Iraq. And this was an area that had remained pretty much isolated from the outside world until World War I. So the language and the customs and the idioms that he grew up with were very much the same as they existed in the time that the New Testament was written. So he came to the United States and he realized that Americans were just kind of missing the boat. We didn't understand it. And he wrote several books trying to help educate us about the idioms in the Bible and things like that. So if you're interested in that line of thinking, you might want to look up the work of George Lamsa, and one of his students is Dr. Rocco Errico. He wrote a lot of books, made a lot of tapes. Last I heard of Rocco Errico, he was down in Atlanta at Dr. Barbara King's church down there, the Hillside Truth Chapel. And she passed away last year, so I don't know who's pastoring that church now. But at any rate, we kind of use words and we don't really understand them. It's possible to know the word, but not really understand what the word represents. And idioms are a perfect example of that. So when Jesus said, let he who has eyes see, and let he who has ears hear, what Rocco Errico tells us is that was an idiom. That was those words mean something different than what we would take them to be literally, because you would simply ask, well, of course, people who have eyes see and people who have ears hear. So why tell people who have eyes to see, and why tell people who have ears to hear? And what Dr. Errico is telling us is it means you have to listen in a different way, not in a normal way. You have to see in a different way. not in the normal way. There's something else going on here. Just don't take this for face value. You have to find a different way to attune yourself to the message. An attunement, a spiritual attunement. So we tend to use words in our language. We tend to discuss things, but we don't really know what they mean. Now, sometimes it's just, kind of ignorance in terms of lack of education. Maybe when I was a kid growing up, I heard somebody use a word and I interpreted what that word meant, and I assigned that meaning. I put a label on it. I assigned that meaning to that word, and I went my whole life thinking that that word meant something that it didn't, And later on, I heard somebody use it in a different way, and I went to the dictionary, looked it up, and found out, I've been using it incorrectly for all of these years. But other times, we just simply don't have the experience. We just simply do not have the experience to really have a deep understanding of it. So, for example, the word peace. We kind of have ideas about what the word peace means. The typical understanding in our culture is, as well as the cessation of hostility, or the period in between conflict, or just basically we're not fighting with one another is what we think peace is. But of course, that's not quite not quite it, right? So Spinoza tells us it's not the cessation of hostilities. Okay? It's a way of being. It's a way of living. It's a way of life. And the Bible tells us there's a peace that passes understanding. So it's not an intellectual. It's not an intellectual peace. It's something different. You see. And herein is where we start to get into great difficulty, particularly when it comes to discussing spiritual things, because there is that which comes before words. There is that which is above words, below words, through words, before words, and after words. But there is this something that exists that words can't describe. The ineffableness is what we would say. And there's a perfect example, the word ineffable. We use the word ineffable, or I use the word ineffable, and basically it means something that can't be explained. It is, but it can't be explained. But we try to explain it. You see, we try to explain it. So we put a label on it. We say, oh yes, well that's ineffable. See, that's ineffable. And we think because we understand the label, we understand the thing, and we don't. So what is peace, you see? Peace is something that has to be experienced. It has to be lived. It has to come from this mysterious thing we call within. And what is love? See, what is love? And there's so many different understandings and different definitions of love, but if we close our eyes, if we take a deep breath and try to feel love, you see, we have perhaps some type of an experience that we can't really describe. We can't really communicate to another person what we're feeling. It's ineffable. It's ineffable, you see. So today I'm on a fool's errand again, and I'm trying to use words and concepts to get us to the place that is beyond words and concepts. And this is why I ask, let's let him who have ears hear, listen in a different way. Let your feeling be your guide. Let the words just kind of be a drone in the background, but let your feeling be your guide. I love in the bagpipes, when you have the bagpipe players, there's a couple of reeds that are just tuned to a certain tone. They don't change, They're the drones. And then there's other reeds that the musician can change the pitch on. They've got ways of controlling keys that they can press and they can control. But those drones are always in the background. like that. Let the words just kind of be there. Let the meaning, let the feeling, let the message come through your heart. So where we're going with this is this whole concept of within, because we are told in virtually all teachings, we are told that there's this something within. So do we even know who we are? Do we even know who we are? Is our opinion, our bias of who we are, is it based on everything out there instead of that which is within? So what is this within? What is it? How do we go there if it's already within? How do we go within? What do we expect to find when we get within? And yet we are told over and over and over again to turn our attention within, to go within, right? To seek the kingdom. Seek ye first the kingdom, which is within. Go within to your prayer closet, close the door, commune with divine love. Be still. Be still and know. Be still. And that's a clue. Be still. Be still and know. So I want to read Dr. Holmes' definition of silence. Now, for those who have the textbook, and I would hope that everybody has a textbook, there's a glossary in the back. And in the glossary, he gives the definition of how he uses words. And again, it's very important because we hear a word, we assume that we understand the meaning, we assume that the author has the same meaning as our understanding, and sometimes we find out we don't. There's a difference. So the glossary is very helpful because when we see a word, we can say, I wonder exactly what he means by that. So here's silence. I just invite you to consider this. Silence. This word is used oftener and perhaps less understood than any one word in the terminology of the metaphysician. There is no place we must go for the silence. There is no particular posture we must assume. There is no formula we must repeat. We enter this, quote, inner tabernacle, unquote, by whatever route we may. Some people live in such conscious unity with good that instantly they can turn within and direct the avenues they wish the good to take. Others need to approach by prayer, by singing, by reading a verse from the Bible, by repeating an inspirational poem. If we know that God is forever right where we are, we shall not be reaching out in every direction for Him. We enter the inner chamber of our mind and close the door on all discord and confusion and commune with our God, our spiritual consciousness, our Father within. Our eyes do not see visions, our ears do not hear sounds. The silence is our communion with Spirit. Our awareness of our unity with good, our understanding that the Father within, He doeth the work. Right? Silence, our communion with Spirit, our awareness of our unity with good. So I mention this because if we kind of think about, we talk about being on a spiritual journey, but the journey is not an outward journey. It's not a boat that we take or a plane that we take or a car that we drive. It's not a pilgrimage that we go on. Yet there's symbolism in that, right? There's a lot of symbolism in religious pilgrimages, going to a holy place. There's a lot of good symbolism in that, but the journey, the real journey of the growth of our soul is not a physical journey. Remember we talked a couple weeks ago about Joseph Campbell when he said, in the hero's journey, typically the hero sees some need, sees something that needs to be done, something that would benefit the community, and the hero accepts the mission to go on this quest to find whatever it is. And they go and they meet the advisor who's going to tell them, the sage, the wise old one, who's going to tell them all the obstacles they're going to find and what they need to do. They're going to go and face all these obstacles and grow through them and then return back home. And what they find when they get back home is that physically they are right where they were when they started, but they are changed. They are different people. They have grown. And then usually they find that whatever they were looking for, they had it all along. They had it all along. The journey was not necessary in terms of physically doing all these things. The journey was a journey of self-discovery. So this is most important because we assume, from a spiritual point of view, we assume that there is a spiritual identity, that we are a spiritual entity. We are a spiritual identity. And yet, it's a word that we use, but we really don't have an understanding of what that is until we experience that. Until we actually experience our authentic self. That's another term we use, of searching for our authentic self. That must mean that there is an inauthentic self. So as our consciousness grows, we typically grow through three orientations, and what I want to emphasize today is three identifications. Three identifications. If you ask somebody, who are you? Who are you? How do they respond? How do they respond? I love, we watch the game shows in the morning during the week, and they always come on, and the contestants come on, and the host says, well, what do you do? What do you do? And everybody always has something that sounds like super wonderful. That you figure, well, they just made that up. They're just saying that for the show. But the point is, it's about doing. It is about doing. It is about what do you do, you see? And we identify with what we do. And there's a time as we are maturing, as we are growing, as we identify with the world, we identify with what we do. Well, who are you? What do you do? Oh, well, I'm in this kind of business. I manage this kind of department. I do this, I do that. I solve world peace in my spare time. Wonderful, wonderful. But we have to understand we are not what we do. We are not what we do. And the sad part of it is that many times that what we are doing is completely devoid of what we are. We are going through motions. It is not fulfilling us. It is not expressing the life that we are, the spirit that we are, the joy that we are. There's no givingness. There's no sense of self-givingness sometimes in what we do. But yet somehow we think that we are what we do. And then we kind of move into another phase, which is about what we know, what we're learning, what we know. Well, what do you do? Well, I'm studying to get my such and such a degree at such and such a university, and I've already got these other degrees over here, and I'm learning this and learning that, and I'm investigating this formula that's going to do this or that, or discover this. Find the cure for something. But our identity at that point is about kind of learning. I call it becoming. It's kind of we're learning, we're kind of becoming. Now this too can kind of be devoid of who we really are, in that we may be doing all of these degrees and taking all these courses because of what somebody else told us. See, what somebody else expected of us. When we were in the Durham church back in the 90s, there was a young lady there who she worked for the EPA out in Research Triangle Park. The EPA had some offices out there. And she was a chemical engineer. She had a degree from NC State in chemical engineering. And she shared with the group that she just was not fulfilled at all in what she was doing. It wasn't feeding her soul. There was nothing creative about it. She, in her spare time, she entertained. She did stand-up comedy. She did interesting things, puppet shows for children. And that's where her heart was. That's where she was giving. But during the day, she went to work as a chemical engineer for the EPA. And somebody said to her, well, why did you go into chemical engineering? And she said when she was a junior in high school and it was time to start applying to colleges, her dad took her to the library there in Cary, North Carolina. And in those days, we had what was called the Encyclopedia of Careers, which was a set of books, real big books. And you just kind of could look through and it would tell you all of the different careers and what the demand for employment was and what the salary range was and what the educational requirements were and all these things. And her dad took her there and he flipped open the book and they looked through and they found that at that time, the highest paid profession for women was chemical engineering. And he told her, well, that's what you want to do. That's what's going to pay the most. And NC State's just down the road, and they've got a good chemical engineering program. And that's what he groomed her for. That's what they had her apply for. That's what she went and studied for. That's what she did. That's what she learned. But that was not who she was. That was not who she was. It was what she did. That was what she learned. And then we kind of come to the third level that we talk about as the mystical level, the level of unity, the level of being, you see. And this is the experience of the unity, the experience of the oneness that Dr. Holmes calls the silence. The awareness that all of the creative power of the universe is expressing itself as me, through me. It created me out of itself. I am not separated from it, other than my belief that separates me from it. Now we get to this oneness, we get to this beingness. Now, Joel Goldsmith, if you listen to any of Joel Goldsmith's talks or read any of his books, he talks about being in that place of the awareness. Dr. Holmes calls it the conscious realization of the experience and the presence and the activity of the divine in us, as us, and through us. Goldsmith just says, be still and know. See, there's nothing to work toward if you already are. There's nothing to solve if you are at home or at one with all that there is. So Goldsmith's approach is, don't worry about doing, don't worry about learning. Experience the presence, experience the presence. That's the mystical approach, experience the presence. Now everybody's not ready to do that yet. We all can't do that. We don't know how to do that. But what he's saying is go within, because where are we going to experience this presence? It has to be within. But where is within, you see? Where is within? And how do I get within? But once we kind of get in touch with our authentic self and who we truly are and what it is that we are trying to give in this life. Not get, but to give, you see. Then our doing is an expression of our being. It's no longer empty or devoid of ourself. We're no longer just going through the motions so we can get a paycheck and then go do what we want to do, right? We used to joke that a job is doing something you don't want to do so you can get money to go do what you do want to do. That's empty of the self. Right? We want our doing to be an expression of our authentic self. Right? We want to bake that bread as if our beloved was going to eat it. We want to build that house as if our beloved was going to live in it. And then when we come to the learning, when we get in touch with who we are, instead of learning to please others, instead of learning because our dad told us this is what we ought to do, we are learning what we want to learn to be the best at something, to be the best at expressing our authentic self. Let me put it that way. Not to be the best in a competitive way. I want to be the best guitar player in the world. No. But I want to be the best Jim that there is. I want to know my authentic self, and I want to find the best possible way to give that, to express that. So a couple of months ago, we were talking about the Buddhist monk Matthieu Ricard, Matthieu Ricard, it's French. Most fascinating fellow. You'll find his talks on YouTube. And in this particular talk that we were reviewing for our Wednesday night group, he said, consider that there's two basic orientations towards life. There's the materialist view, which is about getting more stuff, right? and look at the world around us. It's about getting more stuff. Power, money, control, stuff. And then there's the view of becoming a better person, becoming a better human being, which I would say leads us to being a better spiritual being, because when we understand that the spirit is expressing itself through the human form, we are trying to discover our authentic self if we are trying to become a better person, a better human being, a better expression of divine love. How can I love today? How can I serve today? How can I just experience joy and share joy today? So I think what has happened to us, if you look at what has happened, so we have this thing called consciousness, but we don't really know what that is. And we experience these things called thoughts, but we really don't know what thought is. We say, I had a thought. But did you have a thought? Or did you become aware of a thought? See? So philosophers of consciousness, they can talk about these things all day long, and I don't understand much of what they're saying. But we use words without understanding. And what I'm suggesting is we need to realize then that what we think we know, all of these different ideas that we have about who and what I am, are nothing more than ideas. Nothing more than ideas. And there is something that pre-exists the ideas. There's a consciousness, there's an awareness that pre-exists the ideas. The silence, the silence, the silence. So I've used the image of a fan, you know. So if you think of a fan, like you go into a warehouse or a factory and they've got a fan on a pedestal, you know, and it's spinning around quickly and it's rotating, kind of moving back and forth and moving the air around in there. If you look at that fan, you can see right through. The blades are spinning so fast that you can see right through them. It looks like they're not there at all. But if you were silly enough to take something and try to poke it through there, you would find out very quickly that they can't go through there. Because even though it looks like it's not solid, It is solid. What is keeping us from getting through to the other side, of course, is this constant motion of the blades. This within that we are talking about already exists. This within that we are talking about is this deeper place of knowing, this deeper place of being, this deeper place of experiencing life. But we find it difficult to get there because, like the moving blades of the fan, we have these tremendous moving ideas of words and thoughts and distractions and monkey mind, it's called, you know. It just jumps from here to here to here, and we have this opinion, we have that opinion, something comes on the TV and we think, well, ain't that awful? And our mind is just constantly going. And I think that this is exasperated in our current world from the technology that we have. See, we grow up in this culture, we have grown up in a world that literally believes the supremacy of the material. Materialism, life comes from matter. You see, I was reading an article the other day and it says, when did life begin in the universe? And I chuckled and I said, maybe the question should be, when did life create the universe? Right? So there was an assumption there that there was this thing called the universe and there was no life in it. But somehow life got created. And the assumption is something that needs to be challenged. Right? It's a bias, okay? It's an opinion. It's an idea, and then people act out on that idea and never stop to question whether or not it's even possible that there's another alternative, right? So I think one of the easiest concepts that we can share with people is if they wish to think critically, just, you know, have you ever considered the possibility that you're wrong? What evidence might there be that my opinion is wrong? It just causes people to look a different way. So we grow up and we think, well, you know, matter is supreme and intelligence is created by matter, right? Think of that, right? Where did consciousness come from? Well, matter created it. Really? How did it do that? You know, isn't it possible that consciousness created matter? No, the materialists will say, right, consciousness is a function of the brain, which somehow matter organized itself into the brain. And therefore, consciousness is material. It is material in origin. So we've kind of come to this place where the intellect is supreme and knowing things and appearing as if we're knowing things and all of that is just what our society values. And feeling and loving and coming from a place within, a place of the heart, it is not so valued in our society. I mean, look at where art is in our society. You know, starving artists. We don't value art. Look at all of the things that we have done to suppress humanities. Look at all of the things that we have done to diminish anything other than making money. We have lost our feeling. And we have technology that is with us all the time that keeps beeping at us and flashing at us and alerting us and doing all these things that bring the intellect into it, bring the thought into it, bring the head into it. And our heart is not present. Our heart is not present. We are doing without being. We are doing without being. If you look at the world in which we live today, a lot of this morning, if we look at all of the anger and all of the hostility and if you go on the internet and look at some of these things, some of these quote discussions unquote, basically you have two camps of people each calling the other idiots. Where's the love, you see? Where's the love? So what I'm saying is this within is the silence. This within is the pure consciousness that is undistracted by the chatter of the monkey mind. It is what, for lack of a better way of putting it, it is what exists on the other side of that fan blade. See, but here's the problem. Why do we think we're on this side of the fan looking through to that side of the fan? That's just an opinion. Why don't we recognize that we are both on that side of the fan and on this side of the fan? What do we identify with? You see, what do we identify with? Do we identify with the body? Am I my body? Do we identify with the mind? Probably in our culture more so with the mind. I think, therefore I am. So we think we are the mind. We think we are the thoughts. We think we are the activity of thought. And we are not that. Neti neti. We are not that. You know, if you see the Buddha walking down the road, kill him. Why? Because that's not the Buddha. That's your concept of the Buddha. We want to get beyond the concept. We want to get beyond the word. We want to get to the thing we want to get within. I was reading something this morning that just kind of really kind of a whack on the side of the head kind of thing. You know, we talk about this before words. That which is before words, but from which words come. And it sounds conceptually, well, that sounds cool. It sounds interesting, but what does that mean? You know, can we even know what that is? And the author I was reading this morning was Osho, and he said, think of a baby. Think of a baby. The baby is, but the baby has no words. But the baby is, you see. And the baby has sounds, and it just has sounds, and it coos, and it gaws, and it oohs, and it ahs. And it just has sound. And the sound is not a word. And the sound doesn't have a particular meaning. It is just a sound. It is just being a child expressing itself beautifully. And one of the first sounds that the human body learns how to make is ma, right? Ma. It's easy to make. It's one of the first sounds. And who's the first person that we are with, usually? It's our mother, right? So one day the baby goes, and mom coaxes it on. Mama, mama. The little one goes, mama, you know. And then finally the child says, mama, and gets this big reaction from mom. Oh, mama. Now it has a word, still may not understand anything other than it made mama happy. But eventually it comes to recognize that that word, that combination of sounds that just started as a very sound, now it has feeling, you see. Now it represents everything that mama represents to us. It represents nurturing, it represents love, it represents comfort. It represents all of the things that motherhood represents to us. So that was learned. That was all learned. But before the child even knew a word, it was pure, it was innocent, it was pure consciousness. It was. And Osho takes us another step further and he says, we think the consciousness is in our head. Well, when the sperm met the egg in the womb, we had no head. Where was consciousness then? See, and in Buddhism there's a cone. A cone is kind of an unsolvable riddle that kind of locks the intellect up so that something else can break through. Right? But I think I've mentioned this before, but for the fans of the original Star Trek series back in the 60s, there was an episode where something evil got into the system, got into the computer, and it was taking over the ship. And what Mr. Spock decided to do was to give the computer an unsolvable problem, so the computer would just lock itself up trying to solve this unsolvable problem, and then this entity that was controlling the computer would no longer be able to control it. The Buddha's cone, an unsolvable problem that just keeps the intellect so occupied that eventually, kind of like locking up the blades of the fan. The silence that was there, that is there, the within becomes experience, becomes experience. What did your face look like before you were born? Where was your consciousness when the fetus was developing in the womb? What do you identify with? What are you? Who are you? Are you this body? Not. The body I have now, I didn't have 2 years ago. The body I had when I was 5 is long gone. I'm not my body. Am I the degrees that hang on the wall? Not. Those are just some things that I did, some things that I learned. But I am the witness. I am the observer. I remember being 5 years old because I was observing being 5 years old. Now, I identified as that 5 years old. I thought it was me. You know, when my parents told me to do something, I did it, you know. When somebody said, oh, if you do this, you'll be a good boy, well, I did that. But I identified with that 5-year-old instead of the one observing the 5-year-old. Instead of the one observing the 50-year-old, you see. So I invite you this week, step into the ineffableness. Go beyond ideas of right doing and wrong doing, as Rumi tells us. Walk the razor's edge. Use the intellect to help understand that there are things beyond the intellect. There are places that the intellect can't go because it can't work. Light doesn't work inside a black hole. But we can use a telescope to see black holes. We are so much more. We are so much more than we ever contemplate, than we ever consider, because we have let everybody else's opinion of the way things ought to be, the way we should be, what we ought to do, who we are, we have let all of that become the spinning fan blades that have blocked us from experiencing our authentic self. The spiritual quest, the journey within, is to get beyond that chatter. If possible, to stop that chatter. And as Dr. Holmes says, no matter, everybody has to find their own route. Meditation is a practice that helps us to break through that. Love is a practice that helps us to break through that. Don't think with your head. Feel with your heart. When God speaks to us, God speaks in the language of the heart, the language of intuition, the language of love. What does love say to do today? What do your feelings say to do today? Can you open your heart up and be? Dance like you don't care if anybody's looking. Express the perfect love that is the authentic you. That's why we're here. To find that which is already within and to let it come forth. And so it is.